So, yeah. So let's start with that question. Junaid, why should you start a podcast?
That's a great question. Back in the day, people or entrepreneurs or people would write. They would write blog posts. They would show up as a guest on other blog posts and, building the authority, building content, essentially. And I just did it for fun. I just had blogs about random things. And I started realizing that there's just somebody named Seth Godin. He's been blogging since email was invented. Like every single day he's got a blog post out, which is like anywhere from, 150 to 300 words. Not too big, not too long, but having that consistency. So podcasting, when it entered the space, I didn't really know much about it till much later. And because I was experimenting with literally anything and everything, I'm just, testing new software, testing new tools and ways of creating content. I was like, let me try podcasting. So I started my first podcast in 2012 just to have a conversation with my buddies, with my cousin, and, talk about tech. So we called it Still Brewing It. We lasted about 4 podcast episodes. And then that pod faded, because we didn't have the tech that we have now. Like we were using Riverside or we were using Ecamm. We didn't have that kind of tech back then. And it was kind of hard because, no matter. Now, fast forward 2018, for the 6 years that we didn't do any podcasts and kept bugging them like, hey, let's go back to that podcast. It's going to be so cool. But of course, we all had different agendas, different life changes. We all had, 1, 2 kids, young kids in our families that required attention. So, the podcast took a back burner. Now, when I did finally start the podcast, and I'm coming to the why, is let me go to the why people did the blogging, or why people even do journaling, right? It's a personal development tool. Because what happens is we use our brain as a storage rather than a execution chamber, right? We're not using it for executing ideas. We're just storing information. And unfortunately, schools taught us to use our brains to store information.
Right.
So journaling, blogging, podcasting enables you to empty your head so that you have more room for execution. And when I started my podcast in 2018, it was basically following in the footsteps of what Gary Vaynerchuk told me in his book, Crushing It. Just document your journey.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, that's easy enough. I don't know how to tell stories, but I can definitely document the journey, right? So I started that journey with documenting my beekeeping journey, and the rest is history. The first year was hard. It was really hard because I didn't have the consistency. I had all the tools. I bought a microphone, but I didn't have the discipline to sit down and sitting down and recording the thing. That's the hardest thing, especially if you're doing a solo podcast episode.
Yeah.
And luckily I was driving back and forth, so I would just record myself talking into my phone just to get that consistency up. But what really helped with consistency is having guests come on, having that time locked into my calendar. I'm like, hey, at this time, I got to show up and be with Gabe. I got to show up and be with Brian. I got to show up and be with, Donna or Nancy or whatever. So that was important. So interview podcasting, I think, is the easiest way to get started because you're accountable to somebody else, as opposed to a solo podcast, which, again, I'm trying to start a solo podcast for the past 3 years, and it hasn't happened yet. So the why for it is it helps you develop a better understanding of who you are, right? When we know who we are, then it's easier to define and tell people who we are, and, then people are attracted to who you are. So I think that, long story short, why the podcasting is to understand who you are and who you serve.
Oh man, I love that answer. So you touched on something um, that in your story there that you had the equipment, you just the consistency part. Why do you think that most podcasters probably struggle with finding a rhythm for consistency? Because you can go on the any podcast platform you want, and I can name them all up,
Hmm.
and just type in a random podcast name and
Yeah.
find how many have like one or two or three episodes,
Hmm.
and they're just there. They're no longer, it was an
Yeah.
idea that started but didn't have
Yeah.
um, the ability to find sustainability. Why do you think a lot of podcasters do, or what can you do to move past that if you're a podcaster?
Yeah. So the reason why that happens is the same reason why New Year comes. People have tons of resolutions. They stick to those resolutions for maybe 4 weeks, maybe 8 weeks, and then, they kind of lose track of it. It's the same thing that goes with gym memberships.
There you go.
Right? Like you're motivated, like, oh my God, I'm going to do this. You sign up for that gym membership and you go 1 week, 2 week, 3 weeks, and then you start fading and you don't go anymore. So it's motivation fades. It comes real fast. You do something and then it fades. What keeps you in the game is the discipline, right? But it's not easy to build discipline. But what is easy is to find a counterpart, find a partner that can keep you accountable. That's why in cycling you have cycling teams for racing, and even in running, you have running mates that are keeping you going. You need a community. You need other people around you. Human beings, we riff off of that external energy. Even though we gotta have the internal fortitude to keep going, but then the external motivation and accountability is super powerful. And that's how, like, if for 6 months, man, I wanted to become a beekeeper for 6 months. What was I doing? I'm consuming content on YouTube day after day after day. I'm like, I want
Mm.
to be a beekeeper, I want to be a beekeeper, but I'm consuming his content. I'm like, why am I not a beekeeper yet? And then the last video I watched, the guy's like, well, if you really want to be a beekeeper, you need to go join a local beekeepers association. I was like, of course, obviously,
Yeah.
I can consume all the things I want in on YouTube, but until I take the action, until I go find other people that are already doing it, I'm not gonna do it. And that was the thing that helped me move the needle.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. The ability to have accountability. Um, that's huge
Hmm.
when you come in the sphere of like I've had numerous episodes already where I've interviewed people, and the ones that do have a co-host, that's probably a big one is saying they have the accountability of
Yeah.
someone else to kind of rely on. So I want to move into the next thing because first of all, one of the things that catches the eye is the background back behind you.
Hmm.
People who are listening, you can't see this, but it's very nice background. So you got into doing home studios. You've actually created a course about this that you taught. You've written a book about this. Where did the fascination come with in learning how to master building your own home studio and using the space that you have if you are going to become a podcaster or a content creator?
So it all goes back to about 30 plus years ago when I was introduced to photography and filmmaking. Maybe even yeah, maybe even longer, 40 years maybe. I was about 11 years old, and my uncle was like, "Hey, for $1, I give you this film camera." I'm like, "Oh, sweet, let's get it." So I get this camera, get the film, and I'm like 11 years old taking photos of all sorts of things, and that was where the fascination started. And as I'm moving forward, sticking with learning new things. Fast forward to 2001, I joined this company and they have a digital camera. Like, hey, here's a digital camera so we can take product photos. And I was like, oh, cool. So it reignited that desire that I have for photography. again in 2001. Fast forward to 2013, my wife gets me a DSLR camera for what anniversary. I'm like, okay, this is it. I need to learn everything to take these photos properly. So I took 15 plus courses, joined meetup groups where they use, they taught photography and they, how to use it properly, understand everything. So I like dive deeper into it. I joined filmmaking meetups where we're making short films, we're making documentary films, doing 48-hour projects, 12-hour projects. Again, using cameras, setting up the stage, setting up all these things. So even took courses on Hollywood camera work. Again, understanding how to block a frame, how to set up the stage. So now that the pandemic hit, right? Everybody's showing up on camera. I'm like, oh my God, maybe I can use the stuff that I learned from all those years of photography filmmaking into here. So as I started putting stuff together, of course, I learned from other folks that are teaching. And then the number one guy who actually led me into this area was Pat Flynn, because he's live streaming every single day. He posted a blog post. Again, right, blog post, we're connecting the dots. And he listed all the gear he was using in the studio. And I'm like, wait, I have like 80% of the gear that he's talking about. Let me start pulling things together. So as I did that, people that saw me on Zoom, they're like, wait, are you using a different software than what I'm using? I'm like, no, I'm using Zoom. And they're like, why is your picture so clean? And then I would switch the camera angle. I'm like, well, because I'm using these lights and this over here. And, I've got this stuff set up. They're like, whoa, can you teach me? Can you consult me? So I started, helping people set up their spaces. I found some other 3D software that would help visualize what their room would look like. Kind of like HGTV. They're like, hey, this is what your house could look like if you do the work in here. So I dug into the same software and I started playing around and showing people what their rooms could look like. And that would had a visual understanding of where to put the camera, where to put the lights, and what they would see from that camera. Because here's a fun fact. When I was setting up my office when we moved into this house, I picked that spot to set up my computer desk because it's like a inset, spot.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, it's going to be out of the main room area, and I can sit down. And what I focused on is everything that I saw. I didn't think about what the camera would see. The camera would see everything that we don't see because it's behind us.
Right.
So as soon as I turn the camera on, I have these two blaring windows in the shot. I'm like, okay, this is not going to work.
Right.
So that's how it all started. And, eventually I turned the room around. We had these windows redone and then started, putting the stuff together in the room to make it look presentable. Yeah.
I love that the journey had led you on to discovering different things.
Mm-hmm.
All these, this is what I tell people, all those acquired skills, just because they're not being used at the moment doesn't mean they won't apply to something else
Exactly.
down the road.
I call it still skills stacking.
Yeah. There you go. That's a good way to say it. Okay. You've spoken at Podfest, at Podcasting Made Simple Live. You've been in rooms with a lot of your colleagues. So, what is the one question you most often hear on stage when it comes to asking about podcasting advice or things within the industry that you see that most, creators are curious to learn?
Most people are always asking, hey, what camera should I use? What microphone should I buy? They're trying to put the cart before the horse. Right? You can buy all of that gear after you've worked on the horse. Who's the horse? We're the horse. Right? You got to be able to drive and pull that cart. But if you keep putting stuff in the cart and you don't have any stamina built, you're not going to be able to pull it. Just like my journey, I had all this gear, but I didn't know how to speak. I didn't know how to talk. I didn't know how to start a story. Didn't know how to start a podcast. I wasn't comfortable in front of a camera. Like all of those things are skills you cannot buy unfortunately.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we don't live in that kind of matrix where you could tell Trek, like, hey, I want to learn Kung Fu. And then, 5 minutes later, I know Kung Fu.
Yeah.
Show me.
Right. That doesn't happen.
Hmm.
So,
I mean, they are working out in that technology. I mean, don't get me wrong. The
yeah.
CPU that's in an iPhone are smaller than our fingerprint, right?
Yeah. So I think what you've just mentioned there is what some people commonly call gear paralysis, or if
Mhm.
in our community, we call it gear acquisition
Yeah.
syndrome. So what is the most common reason people delay starting a podcast, knowing, that they have the gear, but yet, why is there a delay tactic as far as trying to get started? There's, again, you said you had all the gear and yet it took you so long. And even now, you've waited 3 years before starting a solo podcast. So what is that? How do you move past that so that you can find eventually what works for you?
I think two things you need. One thing is you need somebody in your corners encouraging you.
Mm-hmm.
And I got a lot of people that have said to me, like, hey, you should do this, you should do this. And you need another person that's leading you the way, or even a solution that can help you pave the way, right? I think those are very important things. When you have somebody leading the way, it's almost like you're standing on the bottom of the stair step and you're just scared to take that first step. And if somebody just comes along like, hey, let me show you the first step, let me show you the second step. And then when they get that hang of taking that first, second, third step, they're like, oh, this is easy. I got this. Like I spent 3 hours the other day with my friend setting up his environment on his computer so he can vibe code.
Yeah.
And it took us that time to set up everything. And he had been working on himself. He's like, dude, I'm constantly copy pasting code from here to here, here to here. How can we make this easier? I'm like, well, I've already done this. Let me show you the way. So I spent some time with him. We set up his environment. And he's like, dude, I ran out of my tokens by the end of the night. I had to upgrade my plan. I'm like, now you know how to run up the stairs.
Yeah.
And I think that's super, super important to have somebody guide you in that first 3 steps, because that's all it takes. 1, 2, 3. ABC is the first 3 letters schools teach to kindergartners. That's all you need to know. ABC. Abracadabra.
Yes.
Apple, bat, cat. So if you can take somebody through those first 3 steps, I think the rest, they're like, hey, got this. Same thing with cycling, right? You the first time you're learning how to ride, you're going to lose your balance because you don't know which way to turn. You got to keep pedaling. But once you've got that hang of it, you can never forget to ride a bike.
I love that. So, when we go down the progression of starting a podcast, right? What's the first thing do you think that most new podcasters probably need to focus on more than anything before they sit down to record?
I think the first thing they need to know is why they're even doing a podcast.
Yeah.
Right. If they have that why defined, then it's much easier to go through. For me, I was like, hey, I'm doing this podcast because I wanted to, and then I get to document a journey that I'm going on starting next month. And this was April 4th, 2018 is when I started documenting the beekeeping journey. And I still had a few steps to go. Like I knew what I was going to talk about. I knew where I was going to record because I was discovering all these things, but I didn't know how to get started, even that first episode. And then it was talking to a colleague of mine. He's like, hey, you should talk about queen bee because it's about beekeeping. I'm like, yeah, of course. Like, no, not that queen bee, Beyonce.
Oh.
Like, what? So that gave me a, really creative way to get started with that episode. You can go listen to that first episode on my podcast. I didn't even talk about what the podcast is going to be called. Like, but I wanted to get that thing going because I had all of the initial ingredients to make that sandwich. So you can't make a peanut butter sandwich without toast,
Yeah.
jam, and peanut butter, right? You can't make a sandwich without those ingredients. So you need those first three ingredients to get you started.
Absolutely. So now that you've come to a point where now you're 700 plus episodes into creating podcast, what advice would you give somebody who's, either just started or somebody that's even been doing it for just a couple, like 20 episodes, that will help them maybe lessen the mistakes that are going to happen along the way? So, for example, like finding and implementing a vetting system. Do you have a way that you would say, these are a few steps that you could possibly implement that'll make it a little bit easier for you instead of having to do so much work? Because this is the reason this show was created. I want to put less resistance for new podcasters who want to get started and have no clue. They have no idea when they sit down, just the idea.
The first thing you want to start with is have an interview session with your chat.
Okay.
Right? Because now somebody else is asking the question and you now get to be creative and speak it out. Because back in the days, I would say, hey, just sit down and just write out all the thoughts you have in your mind. And this is something that my English teacher taught. And she would say, hey, every day you got to do free writing. I'm like, what is free writing? Like, just write whatever comes to your mind. Like, whatever? But I can't even think. Like, just write that. I can't think of what to write. Just write that exact sentence. Because what we're trying to do is we're trying to get the engine started, right?
Yeah.
Right. Sometimes it's hard to get that engine started, but now I can't stop the damn engine because I have so many ideas, right? But once you got that engine started, you're not going to be able to stop. So to do that, we have so many amazing tools now. You could just say, hey, chat, I want to start a podcast, interview me so I can get all these thoughts out of my head. Right. And we've got this companion now that can do that. And if you don't want to use chat, just ask a friend. Just ask anybody, right? They're probably going to be more, they're going to be probably more blunt than chat, because chat's just going to go along with whatever you say.
Yeah.
But if you talk to another person, there's so many podcasters around. Just ask anybody, like, hey, can you help me get this thought out of my head? And when you do that, you're much more, you have a lot more clarity to understand what the next steps are going to be.
I love that. So when it comes to interviewing people and reaching out to guests, what are some of the methods you have used that you find a lot more success in? Because it's, one of the things that I've seen in doing the research for this show was people asking, how do you find your guest? How do you, and then how do you invite them on to actually have an interview session with them?
That's a great question, because how do you find a guest? Well, guests are a dime a dozen. Like, literally, there are more guests available for a podcast host than there are hosts available for a guest. Right. The ratio that Podmatch recently published, probably 6 months ago, was one host to 26 to 46 guests.
Wow.
Waiting to be on the podcast, because as a podcast host, how hard and how many different things there are to do.
Yes.
But as a guest, I just text, you texted me like, hey, Junaid, where are you at? Here's the link. I show up, have a conversation, and by then by the time I'm done, I'm done. But you still got work to do, right? So that's why there are more guests than there are hosts. Yes. So that's not a problem. There's a ton of guests available. They have a ton of sites available. Anywhere you throw a rock, like, hey, I'm looking for a guest, everybody's just going to jump on, like, hey, I want to be a guest. So that's not the first question you want to start with. The first thing you want to start with is having clarity on what type of guest do you even want, because that might be hard. right? What is a guest coming and talking to you about? If you brought somebody on and they're talking about their bacon business and you have nothing to do with bacon, it doesn't make any sense.
Are you hungry this morning? Is my question. We talked about
Right?
bacon.
Well, I'm fasting, and then this guest came on my podcast because my podcast is still very broad because it's passion to profit stories around what thing? Entrepreneurship. That's still very broad, right?
Yes.
So this guy comes on and he's talking about how he makes this stuff, and I'm like, oh my God, why am I talking to somebody who makes bacon? I don't even consume this product. And anyways, that's something else. So again, right? So once you have that first clarity,
right,
then it's a lot easier to find the guests. Now, how did I find my first few guests? I talked to my friends. I'm like, hey, Ollie, we were in the band together. You want to be a guest on my show? He was one of my first podcast guests. My cousin, my brother-in-law, they were some of my first podcast guests on my podcast. Like, hey, just loves to have a conversation. And then they came on. I even wanted my wife to be a guest on the show, but that never happened. I mean, I know you have a whole show with your wife, which is amazing. And I'm like, oh my God, I want to do something like that. Right?
It's great because she's willing to. That's the thing, right? You got to have a willing participant for a lot of these things to happen.
Yeah.
But I wanted to kind of just, what you're mentioning here, because we're talking about when people get started, and there's a lot of people that have the idea of starting a podcast, but then it's the idea of picking a genre or a niche that kind of hampers a lot of people from starting because they go, hey, I don't know. I want to talk about so many things, right? The idea behind this show, right, was that I wanted something that could be niche, but also broad. Mm-hmm. That's hard to do. That's hard to find a mix between both. So I was like, why not talk about a podcast about podcasting? Because the niche is podcasting, but what makes it broad is there's so many different people and genres creating podcasts. Mm-hmm. And I get to pick their minds about how they get started, and then hearing, why they chose their niche or why they're in that genre that they're passionately talking about. So have you ever found a little bit of resistance in dealing with such a broad topic as entrepreneurship, where you said, man, maybe I need to become a little bit more hyper-focused on a certain just area of it or particular, or saying, maybe I need to refocus it?
Well, I have thought about that many times, and I was like, maybe I should do a speaker series, maybe I should this series. But what I found is what the service that I provide is, again, for podcast hosts and podcast guests, because they are showing up on camera, they are showing up on microphone. So what a service that I'm delivering, I'm providing people to set up their home studios, I'm providing people to set up their lighting, their cameras. So I technically want to talk to anybody who's in the podcasting space. But then I also want to be able to provide my listeners to say, hey, here are different ways you can make your passion grow to profit. So it's a two-parter, two-sided angle that I look at it. But some of the most popular podcasts are super niche and broad. So the example that's coming to my mind is Cliff Ravenscraft. If you haven't had him on your podcast, I absolutely recommend that you bring him on. This gentleman is the reason why people like Amy Porterfield, John Lee Dumas, Pat Flynn have podcasts. He taught them how to podcast. His first podcast, get this, was about a TV show where a bunch of people were lost on an island because a plane crashed there. His podcast was about Lost, and he would publish this episode right after the TV show would go on, and then his podcast would be a recap of what happened and what he thinks. So much so that people from all around the world were listening to his podcast because they were also watching that TV show at that same time.
Right. And, it's kind of funny that you mention that, because it's interesting that I've seen this course, on the if you have Apple TV, you'll notice this, but they're starting to create podcasts that align with their shows.
Mm-hmm.
Netflix is doing this as well.
Mm-hmm.
The entertainment industry, they see the value, and of course, having a companion podcast piece
Oh yeah.
for people to come along and say, I want to talk about this. I'm obsessed with this show or the characters or the themes or whatever.
Yeah.
And, it's only niche for that show, right? I mean, that's the thing.
But there's millions of people watching that show.
Yes. Right.
So you might think it's niche, but every niche is so broad and can go so much deeper, right? It's about the depth. And that's where you get depth with the niche that you pick.
Yes. Oh man, I love that one.
Another example that I want to share. So when Game of Thrones came out, I was like, I don't know what the heck is this show? What is happening? So anyways, season 2, my wife used to watch it. And after 2 seasons, I was like, okay, I want to catch up. What's going on? I'm interested. So I discovered this one girl. She had a YouTube channel, and she would talk in at length about the different characters, the storylines, about Game of Thrones. So now I knew, after consuming her content, I knew more about the show than my wife did, who'd been watching the TV show for like 2 years.
Well, and that's the beauty in what we're getting to do here. Is the fact that we get to pass along information that reaches people through multiple mediums. Because I've had people who come on and they do enjoy the audio part, and having an aspect like also adding video. Not everybody watches it, but still, in being able to use both, you have people who might be able to watch on, say, like you said, a YouTube channel. You have people who are able to consume a podcast while they're working out, while they're running, while they're doing stuff around the house.
Yeah.
So there's an added value in being able to create both. Now, this show will primarily focus in on the audio aspect, because I do want to teach people how to do this, and maybe if they're maybe not so inclined to want to jump behind a camera, but I also want people to understand that podcasting is no longer just the idea of creating an audio medium.
Yeah.
It's now a little bit more vast and expanded of what people look at. And there are podcast purists who say, no, it's only audio. So when it comes to that, speaking of both of them, that's kind of the lead in I wanted to. Is it more important to have a great, to build studios, a great setup, or is it better to have a better setup, a better build that speaks to having your audio quality sound great? What is more important? This is like the chicken or the egg.
Well, I would start with the chicken, which is the audio, right? Because an egg doesn't make any sound. It's really right. You got to start with the chicken, which is you got to make sure that your audio is dialed in. And the cool part is podcasting has been around for 21 years, right? And the reason a ton of people still buy the Blue Yeti is because Blue Yeti has been around from day one. They put a lot of marketing into it. Logitech now owns Blue Yeti. And you can start with that microphone, but record that episode in a closet, because it needs a lot of, it picks up literally everything. So you want as dead as possible sound as possible.
Yeah,
I say it right. Because people are focusing on that audio experience. It's an intimate experience, so you want to make sure that your audio is dialed in. Now, video aspect gets you more people, more eyeballs. YouTube has a lot more people coming to, how do you discover new content? It's YouTube, it's Facebook, it's Instagram. All of those platforms, you can attract new audiences. But once they've discovered you, they stay for the audio experience. Like, I still join Clubhouse on a daily podcasting morning chat from 7 a.m. to 8 a.m. Eastern time, every single day. And it's an audio experience. I get to talk with my friends. I get to listen to them talk about podcasting, right? It's really important to have both aspects. But if you can only afford one, make sure you have the audio dialed in, because if they can't hear you properly, if they can't understand the words that are coming out of your mouth, to quote Chris Tucker,
Yes. Yes. Rush Hour.
rush hour, that's where it's going to be.
That's where I
Audio
love
first.
that. And you touched on one other aspect of podcasting as well, which is how do you approach your own personal approach to promoting what you've created with your podcast? Again, for the new creator out there who's just getting started, those are the main questions. The audio in my content. So then, we'll talk about promoting first, and
Yeah.
then there's one more question I need to ask you about. But how do you find your methods to promote your podcast on the regular? Because you've 700 episodes in, you've had to do a lot of promotion.
Absolutely. There's a ton of promotion happening for these episodes. And I think the most fundamental is, what's the common denominator in promoting literally anything? Is it video? Is it audio? Is it text or images? Right? We have 4 mediums that we can attack. Which one do we count on literally every single day?
Yeah.
So think about that for a minute.
Right.
How do you read your news? How do you listen to your news? Or how do you consume your news? Like, what are those elements? Well, the number one thing most people do is they wake up and they check their emails. They're reading text all the time, more than anything else. Even when they're watching video, they're looking for something that has the burned-in text. So they're still reading text. So text is the foundation for everything. We're going back to blogging. We're going back to email, right?
Yep.
That's the foundation of literally everything, of language, of everything that we do. Communicate. How do you communicate with computers? We use text. How do you communicate with LLMs? You use text. Audio to text transcription, right? Text is the foundation for literally everything. That's where the gold is. Libraries are full of textbooks and notebooks. Einstein, they found stashes and stashes of his notes in these storage rooms. Those are the notes that he would write down. So text is the foundation for literally everything. And the reason I say text is because that's the easiest thing to manipulate. That's the easiest thing to promote. I ask these hand-raising questions on my social media all the time. It's easy to read, it's easy to respond, and it gets the momentum moving. Yes, you can put a lot of effort and time into creating some beautiful video, but then you got to look at the ROI, right? Once you have the engines in place, then you can do a ton. But until you're there, build that foundation on the text. Promote email, newsletters. I mean, why are people loving Substack right now?
Yeah.
It's because of the text.
Yeah, that's right.
It's the newsletters, the emails, like all of this stuff. Like, we think it's video and we think it's audio, but it's actually text, right?
Yeah.
Because that's the foundation of literally everything. The transcripts that we're creating. So that's how I've been promoting my stuff. We tried all different ways, and text has come back to be the number one medium.
Yeah, because I'm eventually going to write, a lot of this stuff into articles and posts, because it finds an easier discoverability. That's what SEO ranking is. It's going to find the text and the words. So yeah, love that. That is, again, this is gold. New podcasters, listen, take notes. This is why I'm having these people on. Okay, so the next thing I want to move into is one of the ones that a lot of creators have a hard time with, and this is distribution. So what have you found that works, in your opinion, to find ways to distribute your podcast, whether it's video or an audio medium?
Mm-hmm. So with podcasting, we already have video. We have with podcasting, we already have syndicated platforms like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, There's so many different platforms.
I know.
There's so many different platforms
This
that
is why it's
are,
confusing.
promoting audio. iHeartRadio, Audible, you name it, right? YouTube, like everybody's ingesting that audio so that you can listen and, come back to the source. So audio is number one. And if you have your RSS feed set up correctly and you're going out to these different places, you're golden. The next level up is video, right? If you are creating video, you can post a video on multiple platforms. Apple Podcasts just announced that they are going to be supporting video.
Yep.
HLS format, which is, again, HLS format is the same format YouTube, Vimeo, Netflix. They've been using HLS for ages, right?
Yes.
So now Apple's like, okay, we'll add it in too. So then number two is video, audio video. And then, of course, you got to have, talk to your people on your email list, newsletters, LinkedIn articles, Facebook posts, Instagram posts, Threads, Twitter, like all of these places are really low-hanging fruits that you can create content and post on there very swiftly, right? Doesn't take a lot of time. You can easily put that content together and even schedule it and post it out there. So it's simplifying your reach and your thing. And once you know where your most audience is coming on, then you can spend more time on that specific platform. But you got to know where that is.
Yes. So now this leads into the fun part of the interview where we get to ask, a lot of the things like what you got going on, some of the projects you're going to be working on. One of the ones that I want to mention is one that you've recently started putting together, which is called Pod Glue, which is, I love this idea. So you're creating a podcast app that you're calling an operating system for people to, for episode growth, for publish, or everything that we kind of covered here, the distribution, to find an all-in-one way to make this easier for podcasters who really, again, want to start putting their voice out, but there's the resistance of learning the tech, learning the promotion, learning the distribution, learning the channels of how to actually engage with people and guests and build communities. So what was the idea behind getting started with Pod Glue, and what do you see for it once you feel like you're comfortable saying, I'm ready to start full on launch, or, getting it out there for people to start actually using?
Yeah. So it's already in beta. There's a few people already using the application. I'm getting feedback and I'm, making those changes and squashing those bugs. But the launch date is April 4th, 2026, marking my 8 years into podcasting. And it's paired with a book that I've written, which basically what Pod Glue is the implementation of the philosophy in the book. The book is called Podcast Relationship Management. And this is something that I discovered over the 8 years of podcasting, is that I'm not just creating content. Podcasting isn't just content creation. Number one, it's personal development. Number two, if you're a interview podcaster, you're building a relationship with these people.
Right.
These people are long-term people that are going to come back onto your show. They're going to work with you in the future, that like what you do, that like what you are. Basically you're building connections, deeper connections, because we're hanging out here for about 45 minutes together uninterrupted. When do we actually get a chance to do that? Not a whole lot of times, right? It's only on a podcast. So you build a deeper relationship that way. And then when the guest is done, then they go back and listen to the published episode. I'm like, hey, that was such a cool conversation. Let me go see what Junaid is doing now. Right. And then they come back. I'm like, hey, dude, what are you going on? I've got a new book coming out. Can you promote? Can I come back on? Right. There's so many things that happen because you've built that foundational investment into building that connection. So I think that's really important. And that's why we should be looking at it instead of saying, hey, I need more downloads, because more downloads is not going to get you, it's probably going to get you $10.
Right.
Okay. $10 per million, whatever that might be. But again, it's the game is long term. It's a long tail game, I think what it is. So Podglue came out of a frustration that I had 4 years into my podcasting journey. I was jumping between calendar, between spreadsheets, between Google Drives, between recording software, between distribution software, between like I'm jumping through so many hoops just to keep track of one podcast episode. And guess what's happened after I'm done with that one episode? I got to start over again. So I interviewed about 15 podcast agency owners who were managing hundreds of podcasts. And I asked them the same question. Hey, what does your process look like? And guess what? They had a very similar process of what I was already doing.
Right.
They're jumping through hoops all day long, right? And if one of their employee leaves, they got to learn all over again. What did they do? Like they're not leaving their knowledge behind or downloading it to somebody else because they're gone. Hundreds of podcast hosts, same issue. So I've done all this research and I'm like, okay, I got to make something, but at that time it was probably going to cost me $500,000 to create something like that.
Right.
And then luckily last year I took the fourth quarter off from recording anything. And what that gave me more extra time to spend in my mind. I'm like, okay, what am I working on? What problem can I solve? So I went to work. I'm like, nobody's going to come solve my problem for me. I got to solve it myself. And about 2 months later, I had a working prototype which did exactly what I wanted to do. And then since then, it's just grown and gotten hardened, gotten streamlined. I showcased it to 40 other podcast hosts that manage multiple podcasts, and they gave me tips. They're like, hey, this should be like this, it should be like this, and I'm tweaking this thing and making it more robust. So it's coming out April 4th, and I'm just so excited to, again, help my team, help myself start that solo podcast that I've been waiting for 3 years, and help others, jump through that journey and shorten that gap as well.
Awesome. I love that. So when you launch, let me know. I would love to do a nice little write-up on it, because it's great that, again, we're doing the same mission. We want to lessen the resistance for people to get started in doing this, and being able to craft and share their voice without having to do everything that I'm trying to rely on the acquired knowledge of multiple podcasters to make this a little bit easier, which you've done essentially the same thing. Now you got it in an app. All right, Junaid, I got to get going because I have another episode to record here in about a minute.
Awesome. Well, this was fun. Thank you, Mitch.
But this was fun.
Thank
I
you
do
so much.
appreciate it, and we will have you back on because I'm going to be doing this for a while. This is my fun thing.
Awesome.
I love it. I'm passionate about just interviewing, podcasting, finding different people. Now I found the medium to do it that I actually help people. All right, Junaid.
Okay, thank you so much.
Man. All right. You have a good one, buddy.
You too. Bye.
Bye-bye.